Hello, Marcela. Hello, everyone. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. Hello, Danielle, Mariana. Good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
We'll get started here in
Hello.
just, hello, just 1 second. Wait for a few more folks to join us. Good morning, Fernanda. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, guys, I think we'll go and get started here. I want to remind everyone, if you haven't done so already, to make sure that you sign in to the virtual classroom anytime between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. each day, Monday through Friday. Again, this is for attendance purposes. So regardless of whether or not we do an activity in the virtual classroom, please make sure that you are going in during our class to sign in. All right, we're going to be continuing to meet every day like we're doing online in these online meetings. Sometimes we'll be in the virtual classroom doing an activity. Sometimes we will not. So again, just make sure that, that you do go in. Today will probably not be in the virtual classroom. So again, if you have not done so already, make sure that you quickly sign in and out so that, so that you get counted as being present, right, for each day's attendance. All right, so we're starting week 11 this semester, and our concept for this week, education. And I want to do a slightly different activity this week, and I want to focus on conducting an interview. And so today I want to talk a little bit about education as a concept, what you guys think about education. But I want to start by presenting a video that really talks about how to do a good interview, because one of the things that we're going to discuss is talking about education, but from one of your family members' perspectives. That is, I want you to interview somebody, preferably someone close to you, a family member, about education. And so make sure that today we're going to look at a video. I would like for you to take some notes about how to take a good interview. And I think we're going to leave today with some good points and some things that you can try to do yourself when you're preparing for an interview with one of your family members, someone that's close to you that has maybe a specific perspective on education. Okay, Claudia, I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and mute your mic. If anybody wants to jump in, I encourage you to do that. Go ahead and unmute your mic. But if you have some background noise or if there's some feedback, you might want to mute your mic. If you have a headset, usually that will solve any problems with echoes or feedback. So if you do have a headset, that might help. But I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone for now. But again, feel free to jump in and interrupt me at any point if you have some comments or questions as we go and as we discuss today's topic. And this is for any day that we have classes, right? So I always want to make this as communicative as possible. But today I want to begin with a short video that I want to go ahead and start. And I may pause the video depending on some key points that I want to bring up. But if you have a way of taking some notes, I think this would be a good time to do so, whether it's on a piece of paper next to your computer or cell phone, depending on how you're accessing this class. I would try to have something there with you to take notes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and hopefully everyone can see this video, see my screen. All right, I'm going to play just a second and then I'm going to pause it. I'd like for you guys okay, just let me know, guys, if you can hear the video. I just played a couple of seconds there. Are you guys able to hear the video, hear the audio from the video?
For me, that was extremely loud.
Yeah, for me too.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. I'm going to turn this down. Hopefully this also, well, let me try this.
Interviewing is an art, but I don't.
Okay. Can you guys hear it okay? Is the volume okay?
Yes.
It's better.
Okay.
Treat it that way. So let's put it like this. This is basically a talk about not talking. I work at a very eclectic community radio station, and we're really lucky. We talk to all kinds of people. Yeah, there's bands that come through. That's great. I can hang with that. But authors, read a fucking book. We've got authors coming through. We've got poets and drug addicts and nonprofits of every stripe and scientists, like people with job titles like fluvial geomorphologist.
Right, so this guy, he works at a radio station and he's talking about how he does a lot of different types of interviews, and he's going to give us some tips. He's about 6 different tips that he's going to suggest us to do whenever we're interviewing basically anyone. Doesn't matter if you're interviewing someone famous or anyone, basically. He's going to give us some good suggestions on, I think, what we can try to do this week when we interview for this week's activity.
I don't know either. But the thing is, I have to have this conversation with them, and I want it to be good and meaningful. I really do, and I want to know what makes them tick. The problem is I'm not an expert in fluvial geomorphology, and the truth is, in this life, you get to be.
So in your notes, guys, what he mentions here is, he says, I want to know what makes them tick. To make someone tick, to make them tick, maybe write down that phrase, because this is what I want you to do when you interview your family member. You want to know what makes them tick. Now, what do you guys think that means when you hear that? Have you heard of that phrase before? What does that mean to make them tick?
How did you
Feel free
spell?
to unmute your mic. I'm sorry, Danny, can you repeat that?
How do you spell it? Tower.
How do I spell the word?
Yes, please.
Tick, T-I-C-K, to make someone tick. Let me see if I can open up the chat here, and I'll type in to make to make them tick? What makes, and I'll put it another way. What makes, for example, your dad, for example, what makes your dad tick? Or what makes Claudia tick? All right. What makes Fernanda tick? What does that mean when we ask that question?
Maybe like it's something that makes you doubt or think twice what you're going to do.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Is that Claudia?
No, Deyanira. Something that makes you doubt
Sorry.
or think twice what you're going to do. I don't know.
Not exactly. If I say anyone else before I go into it, anyone else have another idea about what makes Marcella tick? We all know Marcella. What makes her tick? What makes Danny tick? What makes your friends tick? What makes your... And think of a clock, right? A clock ticks, right? I mean, it's not a perfect analogy here, but when you ask this question, you're basically asking what interests this person, right? You know these people very closely. You know your friends from school. Of course, you know your family members. You know what makes them tick. You know what interests them. You know what drives them. You know something about them that that they are interested in, that they have, maybe there's something that they're good at, that they spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about, and they do it. Maybe it's in their, it's part of their job. It makes them tick, but it's something that really drives them as human beings. All right. So whenever you're thinking about doing an interview, one of your objectives is trying to find out what makes them tick. Now, you know your family members, and maybe you already know what makes them tick, but you're trying to find out even more information. Maybe there's some things that you can ask them about education that has never come up. Maybe you choose a particular family member precisely because you want to know more about how this person feels about the topic of education and some of the things that you're going to ask that relate to education or teaching and learning. Okay, so this is what the speaker here is talking about, is you're really setting out to ask, well, what makes this person tick, the person that you're interviewing?
An expert in like one, maybe two things, max, okay? So how do you get through this? What I want to talk to you today about is how to fake your way through an interview and hopefully have a great conversation on the other side of it, okay?
How to fake your way through an interview. He's going to give us some tips on how to fake our way through an interview, but hopefully to come out with some really good information at the end of it, okay? So these are the 6 tips that he's going to recommend, and hopefully you guys are able to write these down someplace in your notebook.
Now, I did get some on-the-job training. It was very sparse, and the woman who was training me, she's sort of walking me through the building. I was going to be on the air in a week, and she's like, here's how you do this, here's how you do this. Oh, and you're going to be interviewing people. And I'm like, oh, okay. I get a pen out, right? She's like, here's how you do that. You just shut up. And I put the pen away. She's like, you just shut up. You got that? I got that. And that was 15 years ago. I still got that. It's fantastic advice, and there's a couple other tricks that I want to share with you. There's about 6 little ones and then 1 massive one, so let's do this. Here's how you interview almost anyone. Trick number 1, do some prep.
All right, so tip number 1, do some prep. And prep is a short version for preparation. So we're going to prepare today and probably tomorrow. We're going to work together and prepare for this interview. All right. So I don't want you to interview anyone today, probably not even tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. But I want to work together, want us to work together on how we can prepare for this interview. All right. How can we prepare for this?
Come on, don't be that guy who is like, I'm just going to wing it, man. And I'm looking at podcasters mostly for this. There's this scourge of people who think that they can sit down and hold their own, and they can't. Nobody is that good. Nobody is that good, okay? And secondly, it's a little arrogant and vain to think that you are. So show your guest.
Part of the preparation I would add here, guys, is I want you to be very purposeful. I want you to have a good reason why you chose the person that you interviewed. All right. I want you to think about why you chose this person over someone else, over another member of your family. And for whatever reason, doesn't really matter what the reason is, only that you have a good reason for choosing this person. Again, we know the topic of the interview is going to be based on education, but I want you to think about why you chose this person to interview.
It's true. Show your guest the basic dignity of a Google search. It's not hard. Do it on your phone. I don't care when you do it, just do it. Okay, so number 2, you are going to be doing some prep. I suggest, since that author is coming in and you may not have read the whole book, or like maybe even half of it, they're going to need you to know about it. So what you do is you find interviews they already did and somebody else.
All right, so he's talking about in the case of interviewing maybe an author and going and trying to find online sources of prior interviews to base the current interview. And so to make it with, to suggest here and within our own context, I would ask that you think about, first of all, who you're going to interview. And then the second point relates more to adding to what you already know about the person. All right. So I want you to try to recall and find out different aspects of this person's beliefs about education, if you can, depending on, maybe prior conversations you've had with your family members beforehand, right? So for example, let's say that, I don't know, at the beginning of this year, this school year, you had a long discussion with your parents about education, schooling, teaching and learning, and you're trying to recall and remember that conversation, because maybe this interview that you're going to do this week can be based on those comments that were made at the beginning of the school year when you had you had this discussion with your parents. So maybe you ask either your mother or father to help you remind yourself about what you talked about, or maybe, of course, maybe you remember everything, but you're recalling that prior conversation so that this interview is not just a repetition of what you already know about the person, what you already discussed in some prior conversation, that this interview is going to extend beyond those conversations to provide something new. Okay, so the second point is to extend or use the interview to extend your knowledge about this person, what makes them tick, what interests them, what are their attitudes, their beliefs about education. But you want to find something new. That's the whole key here. So find something new.
Else can do the work for you. Now, I'm not saying steal their questions, because that's wrong, but I am saying you can use the answers that they gave earlier as your jumping off point. Okay, we call this the Terry Gross move. You guys know who Terry Gross is? Okay, she's fantastic, and she said this was a stealable move. I was in the room. She said you can have it. Okay. So what that looks like when you're basically following up on somebody else's question. So if that person is on NPR, and that person says,
what he says here is basically you're following up with someone else's questions, but for our purposes, it's just following up on a prior conversation maybe that you had with some of your family members that you're planning on interviewing?
Well, my workflow goes like this. I wake up at 7:05, then I do hot yoga, then I'm in the office by 9. You can use that answer and you can pick it apart and you can think, 7:05? It's like a normal person sets an alarm for 7:05. It's 7 o'clock, 7:30. Why that? And then they will tell you, well, you know, I did the math, this is how long it takes me to get to the bathroom, and then the shower takes this long, and then you're off to the races, okay? So 7:05, that's the Terry Gross move. Follow up. All right. Now, if you're going to be finding interviews with people, this is my personal favorite, and I hope that you remember this and steal it, you can have it. It goes like this. Find verbal interviews. When you read in Rolling Stone or some blog an interview, the odds are...
All right, so the third point that he mentions here, number 3, relates to verbal and nonverbal communication. So when you're watching and you're experiencing the interview, you're listening, you're watching the person, what they say, how they say it, because you're trying to find out more information about how they articulate. Most of what we talk, most of the ways in which we communicate relate more towards our nonverbal communication, the use of hands, our facial expressions, our intonation, how high or low our voice is, the volume with which we speak. All right, all of these extra ways that that we communicate factor into really the message here that we are sending. And so when you're interviewing, you need to try to be aware of those signs, right? So that you can pick up those signs and then follow up when the time's right with certain questions that relate to the signals that you're receiving, the message that they are sending out to you based on their verbal and nonverbal communication. It could even be the use of words. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, and I probably should have. For this interview, when you're choosing your family member to interview, I want you to choose them regardless of their language proficiency. I'm going to allow you to do this, the interview, either in Spanish or English, because I'm more interested in the results and what you are going to, if you have to translate, you can translate it later, right? But you can do the interview either in Spanish or English with your family member, depending on their level, right? Their English level ability. Okay. I think it would be easier to do it in English in the sense of trying to avoid having to translate if you do it in Spanish, but you'll have an option to do it either way.
Are very high that interview was done over email. So they're thinking their answers out. It's all calculated. It's tactical. You want that. You want the verbal things, where you get the social cues and the intangibles that they're going to bring to you, like a normal human in a normal human conversation, where you know if they're nervous and you can help them.
I'll mention also at this point that the interview needs to be done face-to-face. So I'm going under the assumption here that all of you are living, you're staying at home, you're with family members that you're seeing every day face-to-face. Okay, so I'm going under that assumption, right? If I have mistaken and you have a different situation, then reach out to me and we can discuss and adjust as needed.
If you know that they're going to be nervous, you can see it and you can predict it, okay? So another thing they'll telegraph to you in these other interviews that you're listening to, do they speak too fast? Are they walled off? Do they have a stutter, a lisp? Like, you want to know all this going in. So find verbal interviews. Now the sidebar to that, this is a great thing. As an interviewer, you really, really want to hear these words. How did you even know that? That's what you want to hear. And if you can find these sort of small-time interviews, these verbal interviews that they've done, right? If you're going on NBC in the morning, you are going to stay up all night practicing. But
he's going into some details about the importance of really knowing the person that you're interviewing. And this probably relates a little bit more to people that you don't know and you're interviewing somebody that you don't know at a personal level. In our case, you're going to know these people, but again, do your homework and really try to recall before you get into the interview, as many details about the person and about how he or she feels about certain aspects, so that you, again, you're just more, you're more prepared. You're better prepared to ask even deeper types of questions in order to get more information. Again, don't make the mistake of asking questions that you already know the answer to. You know these people, and so again, it's a matter of finding out as much as you can so that you're asking really deep questions and follow-up questions that really dig deeper into what makes this person tick.
But if you were going on a high school radio station in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, you were going to phone it in from your car on your way to pick up your kids, right? You're going to forget everything you said on that interview. So those are the ones you want to find, the little tiny ones where the stakes are very low and they're very casual. Because all these tips that I'm trying to give you set a stage for a person to be casual, comfortable, and human. So find the little ones, because when you bring up the thing that they forgot they told the high school DJ in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, they will tell you, how did you even know that? And then they loosen up even more because things are going good. First 3 tips, that's all beforehand. Second 3 tips are going to be during the interview. Number 1.
All right, so he talked about mainly 3 tips that you need to do to prepare for an interview. The next 3 tips that he's going to provide now are tips that you can apply during the interview itself.
I hate to even say it, but icebreakers. They totally.
Icebreakers, okay? So an icebreaker, something that you can do at the beginning of the interview to set the person at ease, to make the person feel relaxed. Even though you're going to know this person, you've spent your whole life with this person, you know a lot about this person. But again, the interview should be a relaxed atmosphere, that the person that you're talking with is relaxed. Maybe it's preparing a cup of coffee for the person or something, but that he or she feels relaxed. Why is that important? Well, because the person's going to be more likely to provide you more information and dig deeper into the questions that you're asking, and it'll end up being more informative as a result.
Work. Your summer camp counselor was right, okay? And the trick that you want to do is when you are breaking the ice with somebody you don't know, especially when they're way out of your league, is make it relevant, camouflage it. So if you're talking to a fluvial geomorphologist, I have. She was awesome. It's great. You can ask things like, what was your major in college? It's relevant, but not really. It's an icebreaker. And then I go, oh, yeah, you know, I went into college as a poetry major, but then I switched to geology. What? Like, how do you connect that? And you ask her that, and she will connect poetry.
So notice the example that he provided. His icebreaker was in the form of a question. So maybe the first question that you pose should be something lighthearted, something that maybe is not super relevant to what you want to know, but it could easily turn into something even more informative. Even if it doesn't, then you later then transition to your first paragraph, question. But remember that your first question should be a lighthearted type of question that is meant to, again, put the interviewee at ease.
To geology, and it's beautiful, okay? So don't fear the icebreaker. It'll work for you. Last 2 little things before we get to the big one. Number 1 is listen.
All right, so point number 2. While you're doing the interview, listen. And this is one of the hardest things to do in an interview, because the tendency is to think about the next question that you're going to ask instead of actually listening to what the person is telling you, and then maybe even coming up with follow-up questions that are really necessary in order to clarify a point that the person mentioned. So this is one of the common mistakes an interviewer will make, is thinking too far in advance into that next question and missing an opportunity for follow-up questions to find out more about something. I would try at least to ask 1 follow-up question for every initial question that you provide. We're going to prepare for our interview in the form of an interview guide. We'll talk about that more later. But basically, you're going to have some questions already thought out, maybe some guide that you're going to have that you can rely on to ask your questions. But we're not going to write out every single possible question that you could ask during an interview, because we want to bring up follow-up questions. We want to listen, pay really close attention to what someone's saying, and then find those opportunities to ask follow-up questions in the interview itself.
Which is harder and harder and harder. Everything in this world is trying to shorten your attention span, and everything is winning at that. Everything is winning. And if you're not listening to me right now, I feel you. But try to focus in, and don't do these corny things of like trying to think of your next question while they're still talking. Listen completely and be there, be present. Don't try to get a joke in, and certainly do not step on their answer.
Don't step on their answers, what he just said there. Don't step on their answer. Get out of their way. Let them speak, right? But really try to listen and pay close attention to what they're saying. And also how they're saying it. So again, that goes back to the verbal, nonverbal communication.
So you want to listen, and you can only listen if you, last one, shut up.
So his last point, point number 3, shut up. That is, get out of their way, let them speak, and you don't want to jump in. He's going to go here in a minute. He's going to talk about, what did he call it? The chicken, silence chicken or something. But basically what he's saying is allow space. You know, when you're having a conversation with someone, even in an interview, when there's dead space and no one's saying anything, the tendency is to want to jump in and fill in the space, fill in the space that's occurring. And you want to say something, either you or the other person jumps in and says something because it makes you feel uncomfortable. So here he's talking about, he's going to speak about this, but you want to be comfortable with that space. In fact, let there be long pauses. If the person is thinking about what he or she is saying, what he's mentioning is that if we just wait even a little bit longer than we're comfortable with, the other person is going to have the time they need to come up with some additional thoughts and perhaps even deeper ideas that would not have resulted if we jumped in and we went in quickly to the next question, or we just cut off the person entirely. So be prepared to let there be some gaps, some spaces of no one saying anything, even as uncomfortable as you may feel, but let that happen, because again, what you want is you want those details, that information that maybe that you didn't know about this person. Again, we think we know what makes our family members tick, but this interview is to really seek further information. We want to know more about this person and how they feel about the topics that we're asking about. And we want to try to do some of these strategies that this person is sharing with us today in order to get the most out of the interview.
She was right. It comes back to shutting up and giving them some breathing room so that they can say their piece at a tempo they're cool with. And there's a fun sidebar to shut up thing, which is this. Dead air chicken. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dead air chicken. That's what he calls it. Dead air chicken is when they don't say anything.
Just right off the bat? No. Okay. So dead air chicken works like...
Chicken, I don't know if you've ever played chicken. I don't know if you have this saying. Have you guys heard of the expression to play chicken?
No.
Anybody? No? All right. So, for example, when we were little, when you're a little kid, sometimes kids will play chicken on their bicycles. And so what they'll do is they'll start on opposite ends of a street or a road, and they'll start going towards each other head on. And they're coming towards each other. They're coming toward each other. And the idea is to not move. Who's going to be the person to get out of the way before they collide and they hit each other? And that's a game of chicken, is who's going to be and usually you use the word chicken to be like, you're a scaredy cat, you're a chicken, you're afraid, right? So it's really a test of a bravery to see who's going to be the bravest and not move and move before they collide. And so this is kind of a take on that. Dead air chicken. Dead air is a term used in when you're on the radio. Radio dead air just means there's nothing. It's just it's silence. And right, that's the kiss of death usually. That's a bad thing on the radio, right? Because you don't want dead air. Somebody's always talking. There's a announcement. There's a advertisement or whatever. So here he's talking about dead air chicken when no one's saying anything, and who's going to be the first person to interrupt the silence? Who's going to be the first person to say something? And that's what he's referring to when he's talking about dead air chicken.
This. It could go on. And I will win.
He's going to joke there because and you didn't catch it probably because I stopped it, but he actually paused. He's in front of all these people, right? And he pauses and doesn't say anything. And then he says something, and everybody's automatically feeling the tension because he's a public speaker. He's in front of all these people, and he's not saying anything.
Because when you create an awkward pause that is awkward enough, the thing that they will desperately fill it with burbles up from a wild part of their psychology that they cannot control at all. And this is where you get your unpredictable stuff. So dead air chicken, do proceed with caution though. All right. So now these things will get you through an interview. They will get you through to the other side, and you will kind of appear competent, because you kind of are at this point, but it won't give you the conversation that you want to have, the one that people will email you later about and say, man, I didn't think fluvial, what is it? I didn't know that was my thing. So they will email you this if you can set the table for your guest to be comfortable. You know when you're at a party and you are explaining your job to somebody else or your passion to somebody else.
So he's going to go, the rest of this talk is basically about what he refers to as setting the table, quote unquote, set the table. Basically what he's saying is that when you're conducting the interview, you want to make the person feel comfortable. So anything that you can do beforehand to make the person, again, feel prepared to speak about the questions that you're going to ask, the better. All right. So this video, I'm going to share the link if you guys want to go back and watch it again. But some of these points here that we've shared today, I want you to try to take into consideration. And I want you to think about the person that you feel is the best person to ask about the topic of education. All right. So remember that education is going to be our topic for today. And when you think about some types of questions, what kinds of questions could you ask? I'm going to give you guys a second to think about this. If you want to reply, unmute your microphone, jump in and share what you think about, what kinds of questions could you ask? Think about the person that you could ask first, but then ask what kinds of questions. And I want to open it up and hear from you guys. I'd like to know what you think, what kind of questions are good questions to ask your family member, and choose one person, one family member. And I want you to be as specific as you think you need to be based on the person that you're asking. So, for example, I don't really think we're going to need questions like, what is education? Try to be more specific. Again, think of the person that you're asking, and you're trying to find out more. You want to learn more about this person, essentially. Right? These questions, again, are not questions that you already know the answers to. Maybe you know something about the answer, but you will have to dig deeper into the interview process in order to find something new about this person. You want to learn something new about what makes this person tick. So what do you think? What are some questions that you might ask in preparing for your interview with your family member? Again, feel free to leave some of your comments, your questions in the chat, or of course, even better yet, unmute your microphone and let us know. What do you think? What are some questions that you might think about in preparing for your interview? And I can already see Deyanira has extra points for uploading her picture and her profile in Zoom. So good for you.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll start with another question while you're thinking about the types of questions. Let me know which family member you would like to interview. Okay, Danielle has shared his first question. What advantages / disadvantages do you find in our educational system? All right, that's a good start. Danielle, thank you for sharing. When you're thinking about questions, guys, and you're thinking about the person, I want you to think about questions that relate to this person, right? So, you know, if this person has had a specific or a unique experience with his or her educational experience, or maybe that they have a particular viewpoint about education that you already know about, what kind of questions could you ask that build on that prior knowledge, right? And really try to think about questions that even could be more specific. If you're thinking about advantages of our educational system, which educational system might you ask about first? Because maybe our high school experience is different, or the high school educative experience is different than elementary. Maybe that's different than the university level and that type of educational experience, right? Maybe it's something specific to Mexican culture that you could include in the question. So when you guys are thinking about your questions, think about how you can try to be more specific. So I'm curious, who would you like to interview? And if you want to share a few questions here, feel free to share them in the chat. Of course, unmute your mic. I'd love to have kind of a conversation and open dialogue with you guys in Zoom here to hear what you're thinking about. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Thank you for letting me know. I had my microphone muted. I was just mentioning that I like this response about interviewing a brother. That's a really good reason for interviewing a family member, because in this case, her brother has had an experience with teachers. And so maybe some of the questions are related to teachers and his perspective about those teachers. My question would be, try to choose a question or a follow-up question that's based on his perspectives of teachers that maybe you don't already know. Thinking about how you could create a question or a set of questions that relate to very specific aspects of some information that might be new to you as his sister in this case. Hopefully everyone can hear me now. Yeah, sorry about that. I muted my mic and I forgot to turn it back on. So thank you for letting me know. Any other questions that you might ask? And I'm also curious, who might you ask? What family member are you interested in interviewing? You're going to be the interviewer. The person that you're going to interview is the interviewee. And so we want to come up with some ideas about some questions that we might ask. So what do you think? Who might you ask these questions to? Who might you interview? And what are some specific questions that you might ask? The key word being specific.
Hello, Benjamin.
Hello, Mariana.
And I was thinking in interview my dad.
Okay.
And I was thinking and asking him, I don't know, something more specific, because when he was young, when he was in high school, he failed like three subjects, and so he decided to not studying anymore. So I don't know. I was thinking and asking him what he could do different, or maybe his teachers or the school could help him. So I don't know, something about that.
Mariana, great. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great observation. And this is precisely what I want you guys to think about, is choose someone that maybe has either a unique experience with education or something maybe just different, or maybe even something you don't know much about or you want to learn more about. And in Mariana's case, she can think of really some specific questions about things that maybe she doesn't know a lot about, or maybe she wants to learn more about. And again, guys, try to think about what you already know and what you don't know. And some of the questions, most of the questions really they should be focused on things that you want to learn more about, that you don't know a lot about, so that you're getting hopefully some new information about this person. Remember, our questions are set out to find out what makes our family members tick. And in this case, one particular family member that we're asking, what makes your dad tick? What makes your mother tick? What makes your brother, your sister, your cousin, whomever? But please choose somebody that is preferably in your house, that you can see face to face, so that you can do this interview face to face. It can be in English or Spanish. Of course, I'm going to be asking that questions be in English, and that when we talk about the responses and we're developing their responses, that it's all in English. But of course, depending on their level of proficiency of English, you can choose whether or not you want to conduct the interview in English or in Spanish. All right. But again, in the preparation, think about some key questions. Tomorrow, I want to continue this activity. And going back to Mariana's example, if she's talking about thinking about questions that are hypothetical, what would you do if, or what would you have done if, right? That's a conditional, right? So there's going to be a good opportunity for her to practice or use some possible conditionals in her questioning. All right. But tomorrow, again, I want to focus more on the interview process, give you guys more time in our online class to work in small groups. And we're going to divide up in small groups and continue preparing for the interview. Please do not interview your family member yet. All right. So I want to spend another day tomorrow in preparing for the interview, and we'll continue with that. Again, if you want to take a look at the video, I'll post it here in the chat. If you want to copy and paste. So I'm going to post it right now in the chat. This is the short link if you want to, oops. Let me try it again. Okay, so I just uploaded the link to the YouTube video that we watched today in class in the chat. Feel free to copy that if you want to go back and watch again the video. Take a look at your notes on how to prepare some of the tips that we talked about here today. And we'll revisit those tips again tomorrow and continue with the activity as we brainstorm and prepare for the interview. All right, so I think we'll stop there, guys. And tomorrow we'll meet again at 9 and continue with this activity, focusing on education and focusing on doing a really good interview. All right, guys, we'll stop there for today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.